we did the whole Warped Tour with the bus with Rise Against, and we split the bus with them, and then we did the whole thing. And then at the end of the Warped Tour, they sat me down and said, like, "Hey, I don't think we want to play with you anymore." And I'm like, "What?"
Welcome, everyone, to This Was The Scene, the podcast that takes a look back at the late 90s, early 2000 punk scene. I am your host, Mike Doyle. Before we start, I have a new Patreon tier called B-Sides. It's where I take out little sections of interviews that I didn't really think kept the interview really moving, and I put them over on my Patreon, so it's $3 a month. Again, it's called B-Sides. You should go sign up if you love the podcast and want to support it. I also started doing early releases of episodes, which will be just the interview itself with no intro or ads. Right now, it's kind of a mix of launching them on Wednesday or Thursday, the week of the episode. So if you can wait till Friday, then it's free. Obviously, just listen on your podcast app or whatever. Right now, they're $3, and it's just a one-off. So again, another way to support the podcast. And I'm thinking of new merch ideas, so stay tuned for that. Formed in late 90s Northern California, Tsunami Bomb stood out immediately, blending sharp lyrics, melodic hooks, keyboards as a true lead instrument, and dual female vocals into a sound that mixed punk urgency with pop instincts and a darker edge. Early releases like The Invasion from Within and Constant Touring built a global following, while 2002's The Ultimate Escape on Kung Fu Records pushed them further, later landing on Rolling Stone's top 50 pop-punk albums of all time. After lineup shifts and a long hiatus, they returned in 2015 with founding members Dominic Davi, Oobliette Sparks, and Gabriel Lindman alongside Kate Jacobi and Andy Pohl, ushering in a new era that led to 2019's The Spine That Binds on Alternative Tentacles. That's Jacobi's record label, if you didn't know that. Still evolving, they've continued touring the US and Europe, and in 2026 teamed with the Hammerbombs for a split EP, Bombs Away, on Rad Girlfriend Records, proving that nearly 3 decades in, Tsunami Bomb is still restless, relevant, and very much alive. This band was a staple on the Warped Tour stage for many years, and you probably saw them on a lot of comps and video comps from back in the day, especially Warped Tour ones. So I reached out to Dom and had this awesome interview. This dude is fucking hilarious, and this is a great interview. And yeah, so I got him on the Zoom, and this is what we chat about. Having a heart attack and a stroke, Jello Biafra, his bigwig Sum 41 theory, getting rejected by labels, getting on Kung Fu Records, the response from changing singers, his thoughts on the Warped Tour, working for Kung Fu, getting kicked out of the band, negative lyrics in their songs being about each other, the Saki Truth Serum story, you definitely don't want to miss this one, and a ton more. Lastly, if you're looking for a freelance graphic designer / motion designer / explainer video guy, then I'm your dude. Email me at mike@drive80.com for samples and pricing. Short list of things I do are brand and visual identity, marketing campaign design, social print and digital assets. Video stuff would be podcasts, clips, captioning on-screen text, sizzle reels, long-form edits for interviews, webinars, and YouTube. TikTok shit, Instagram stuff, and other fucking shit like that. So yeah, email mike@drive80.com and we can start that conversation. That's all I gotta say, so feel free to subscribe, leave a review, and share this with anyone who'd love some punk rock nostalgia. With that said, let's get fucking started. I don't know if this is kind of versatile, but I saw that you posted on Instagram you had some shit happen back in October, like a cardiac event, it said.
Yeah, it's just it's fun getting older, man. It's awesome. Yeah, it was a weird thing because it was kind of out of nowhere, and I've gone through months of appointments and everything about this, and basically what, as far as we can tell, happened was I really didn't eat much that day. I went out and picked up all of the passes at Fest. It was in Gainesville. It was really sunny and kind of warm. And I took care of all the passes. I got all this stuff. I had to help pick up Tsunami Bomb stuff with Andy, the guitar player. And then I had to pick up passes for my partner who was still passed out. Like she had a general pass. So I had to wait in that line. And then, I came home back to the place we were staying. And then I kind of got my equipment together, and then I went out and I think I picked up Kate from the airport, and then I drove back, and I was just running around like a crazy person all day, and I didn't really eat. And we played a show at about, I think it was midnight. It was either 11 or midnight of the first day. By the time I got to that show, it was like super crazy. And I remember walking on stage and somebody handing me a water bottle and looked at it and went, "Did I drink water today?" I think I drank an energy drink, actually. That was about it. And like a couple potato chips thrown in my mouth and stuff like that. We played the show, and the show was awesome. It was so packed, and everybody was so cool. And the show went off. It was great. As the show went on, I felt like I was gonna kind of like pass out. The whole time I was like fighting not to just pass out. And I was like, what's wrong with me? So I kept drinking water. And after the show, I felt all weird. And everyone's like, what's wrong? Because they're all like super sensitive. 'Cause I don't know if you know this. Like in 2022, I had a stroke
Oh,
and
okay.
it really messed me up. I'm really lucky that my partner caught it as soon as she did and everything happened the way it happened, which allowed me to continue to be present in the state that I am in. But it did affect me. Shows at this point after 2022, shows really wear me out. And I'll get aphasia afterwards if I get too exhausted. I'll get kind of confused. Like I got a bit of brain damage from that. It's improved, but shows, especially like Tsunami Bomb shows, can really take a lot out of me. So like my band and my fiance, they're all very hyper aware of my state, and it's nice, but like they'll pick up on stuff even before I do. They'll start seeing me stuttering and starting to struggle when I'm talking or looking around confused and they'll be like, "Hey buddy, let's get you backstage or let's get you to the van or let's get you back to the hotel." It's nice. I have a lot of support with everybody, but so they were really aware, but they could see, I heard later, they could see that something else was wrong. It wasn't the typical thing. So they were already like, everybody was like all over me afterwards. Like I was trying to take pictures and I still felt like I was gonna like fall down. And so I don't know what was going on, but then they're like, I was like, I don't think I've eaten. So everyone got mad at me for not eating. And so we went back to the Airbnb, got food. We're all staying together. We're all hanging out. And I felt a lot better. And I went to bed. And when I woke up the next morning, I had an alert on the Apple Watch that basically said that my heart rate was racing while I was asleep and it went into AFib. I was like, that's not good. And I showed it to the other members. And when my fiance woke up, she freaked out. So she's like, you got to go to urgent care. So I was like, okay, we had another show that night. So we went to the urgent care and they're like, yeah, we don't do heart stuff. You got to go to the hospital. So then we went to Gainesville Sands Hospital, I guess it's called. It was kind of funny that I waited around forever and they were like looking at me and doing all this tests. And finally the doctor comes in and he's like, so there's this chemical, Tropin, I think it's called. I'm probably getting it wrong. But they're like, this is a chemical that gets released when you have a heart attack. And he's like, most people have about 5 instances of it in their bodies at any given time. Like 1,000 instances of it is catastrophic and you have 200 instances of it and it's not going down. And I was like, oh. And they're like, yeah. And I was like, okay, that's weird. And he's like, yeah. And then he just sort of stares at me and I'm like, so the show I have tonight to perform. And he's like, oh, you're not playing any show. You're going to the hospital. And I was like, right. Okay. Okay. He's like, yeah, no show. We're sending you over to the main hospital. You're going in for tests. This is bad. And I was like, oh, right. I should make some phone calls then. He's like, yeah. So, so I mean, I'm really being blasé about it because I went through tests. So basically, the rest of the fest weekend this last year, I spent in the hospital. I passed every test. My heart didn't seem damaged. Everything seemed fine. They cleared me to fly. So they let me out right the day fest ended, and the day everybody was going home. I got out on Monday. So I missed everything. My friend, my bandmate from Loud Graves, Matt, filled in for me for so Tsunami Bomb could play the second show. Poor guy, I think I ruined his Saturday fest because he had to crash course, relearn a bunch of Tsunami Bomb songs. I got to fly home and then I went to see my cardiologist and everything seems fine. They stress test everything. They were like, basically, the thing is, it's like, it wasn't a heart attack. It was a cardiac event. Something was wrong. We don't know what exactly. Maybe your body just kind of flipped out from not eating. It was higher, but it was a higher instances of that kind of thing than we would normally see from somebody who wasn't eating and not, out in the sun too long and just straining themselves. But, everybody's different. So basically, I'm back on blood thinners now because of the stroke and everything else they're worried about. That sucks. But other than that, I'm fine. And so I've just been exercising and kind of getting myself a lot more fit before we play again in April and just trying to put myself in a better place. But yeah, I don't know. Like I'm collecting really terrible things, which is really funny because like I've known so many. I even said this to my cardiologist. I was like, man, I know so many musicians that treat their fucking bodies like a trampoline, just act insane. And I don't do any of that. I don't do any drugs. I don't do anything. I hardly drink at all. I do nothing. I've never smoked, never anything. And then I end up in the hospital for a cardiac event. And the doctor, my cardiologist goes, yeah, that sucks. He's like, I don't know, maybe all those guys drink water. It's like funny. Okay.
Have you upped your water intake since then?
Yeah,
Is
a
that
lot.
really like help?
Yeah, it does. Apparently, it's a big deal. I didn't even notice that I hadn't drank water, enough water. I mean, I did notice when they gave me a thing of water, and all of a sudden I was like really thirsty, and I was like, "Have I drank anything all day?" The first clear water that I had was at the show at like 11 or midnight, whatever time we played. So I was like, "Yeah, it's probably pretty bad." I just strained myself basically like an idiot. Yeah, sorry it was a long-winded story about my health stuff. Congratulations, everybody. That's my prognosis right now. It looks good though.
Well, one of the reasons I asked it because I know my audience is probably average age in their 40s, 50s, and I think there's people out there with other conversations I've had when people start talking about health stuff or, something. I always kind of highlight it or just bring it up because I know someone listening might be going through it or they might not think to fucking drink water, and now they're like, "Oh, I might actually want to do that."
Yeah, they should seriously like definitely drink water. Definitely don't overdo it. But part of my problem also, and I don't want anyone to use this as excuse not to drink water. Like you're all old like me, you got to be careful. But the stroke really did a number on me. So it makes I have less of a forgiveness zone now where you could push it and be okay. Like when we were younger, we're like, oh, I'm pushing it. I'm fine. Everything's fine. We're just gonna keep going. My ability to do that is just a lot less. But it doesn't mean that what happened to me couldn't happen to anybody if you strain yourself at this point. So, yes, drink water. Drink a lot of water.
Do you ever kind of go in with reservations when you're playing a show now?
No, no, I think the only thing that this event really made me understand is that at this point, if I'm going to, well, okay, let's put it this way. Like when I was younger and we were touring all the time, I was in my 20s, even into my 30s, I was like touring so many shows. And that's essentially like for an hour a day, you're jumping up and down with a 2x4 around your neck. When I was younger, I didn't eat very well, but as I got older, I started taking better care of myself and I was like in the best shape of my life. But then now we don't tour as much. We try to play as often as we can. I've definitely had to remind myself, I'm not 20 or 30 or at this point 40. I'm just trying to keep in mind that like I have to approach it a little better. If I'm gonna like I can't run around all day like nothing's wrong, not eating, not drinking, and then jump up and down with a 2x4 around my neck for an hour. I have to be in better shape going into stuff. I have to put myself into a better shape if I want to give the kind of show that I give. So no reservations, but like I've definitely recently had to adjust my outlook and approach and take things a little bit more seriously in regards to being able to continue to do this at the level that I want to do it. I had a conversation with Jello Biafra recently because he's concerned about his heart and the weight he has gained just from being older and not being on tour all the time and gone through a bunch of personal stuff. So he just feels really weird about playing shows, even though, as far as I see, when he gets out there, he kills it. But we were talking about that. He's really concerned about playing shows in a way that doesn't deliver the show that he wants. So something he's been talking about is how what he needs to do to get fit to be able to do it. And it's kind of that. That's the only consideration that's changed. And unfortunately, that's a recent consideration. Probably should have been a consideration sooner, but that's pretty much the only effect. There's no reservations in terms of holding back in any health capacity or in a fact of us playing. Mostly it's just trying to get around people's schedules. When we were younger, it was easier.
Do you find it interesting? I know because I know that you guys are signed to Jello's label, but did you know him prior to that?
Yeah, I was the conduit, I guess, because I got hired. I was working for Kung Fu Records for a while because they had put out the early Tsunami Bomb stuff, and I was helping them like reconstruct all of like they had lost a hard drive full of like album artwork and elements. Like it was just gone. So I was initially brought in to help them rebuild artwork. So like I got to redo a bunch of cool albums that then my name got put in the credits for, like everything from the early Vandal stuff to Blink-182, Buddha to a bunch of the Atari records of just rebuilding albums covers to make it look like they were never lost or the masters were never gone. Like I just redid them. So it was super fun. And then I kind of brought me in on a social media aspect. I started taking care of their social media stuff, and then I started doing like marketing for them. Eventually, I found out a job had opened up because they're in Southern California. I'm in the Bay Area. I found out that Alternative Tentacles was looking for a marketing director, media and publicity. I found out that the GM was somebody I knew from way back when, and I reached out to them and they hooked up an interview. So I interviewed with them and I interviewed with Jello and I got to meet him, and then they hired me on. So I was their marketing guy for a while, and then I left because I got another job offer that was too high to turn down, and did a couple other things, and then eventually came back as the GM. When my friend stepped down, he asked if I would take over. So I did. And then when I had the stroke, I stepped down again. And my brain was too affected. I struggle now. In the wake of the stroke, one of the things that happened is I struggle with numbers and tracking. So it's kind of hard when you're trying to do payroll and accounting, so and royalties. And then they asked me back to see if I'd come back and help mentor the GM and do some marketing stuff. And right now, that's what I'm doing. I'm still working with AT doing marketing. So I knew Jello prior. And then when, we were shopping a new record, I've been sending it around to people, and he found out that I had one and I'd been shopping around. And he got all mad because he was like, "What do you mean you're sending it to all these labels and you're not sending it to us? What the hell?" And I was like, "Well, I don't know. Tsunami Bomb's not really like an alternative tentacles band." And he's like, "I think we're a little too poppy for you, maybe." And he's like, he goes, "Dude, I put out Pansy Division." Like, he's like, "Does your band suck? Is your band a shitty band?" And I was like, "No." And he's like, "Then let me hear the fucking recording." And then when I gave it to him, he came back and he's like, "I liked it." And I was like, "Good. That's good." So, I mean, ultimately, he's like, "Well, I don't normally do this, but I would like to put out your record." So that's how we got it. It was great.
Is that wild just to know that, yeah, I don't know, when people get connected with these names you grow up listening to, or one of the reasons you get into punk rock, or it's part of the all the bands that made it possible for us to be bands and shit. And then you just become like friendly with them, and then he's like, I liked your music. And you're like, what?
Yeah, it is. It's weird because there are times that like I'm talking to Jello, and he can kind of drive you crazy because he's been Jello Biafra for a long time. You'll be talking to him and he'll be frustrated or pissed off about these things, or it'll just feel like you're talking to this like, I don't want this sounds so bad because he is my friend and I don't want to disparage him in any way because I really do actually genuinely like Jello Biafra. He is a very interesting guy, but he's a good guy overall. I like him. But sometimes it is like dealing with a boomer boss that doesn't understand all the time how email and internet works. But then other times he'll do stuff and say stuff, or I'll see him go out on stage with some other band and he'll just absolutely destroy it. And I was like, "Oh, right, that's Jello fucking Biafra." Like you can kind of forget for a second, and then you're like, "Oh yeah, right, that's right. I remember now." I remember the first day Tsunami Bomb ever played Warped Tour. It was definitely an experience and like a long story in itself. But at the end of the day, I was just sort of sitting there trying to take it all in because I had been to the Warped Tour, but I'd never played it. And it was just an insane day of meeting just like that, like running into musicians that I had only heard about or watched and never interacted with. And all of a sudden I'm like interacting with everybody. It was really overwhelming. This had to have been about like 2000. I remember Warren Fitzgerald from the Vandals came up to me because already we had started talking and playing with the Vandals and what led to us being on Kung Fu Records. But he was like, "How was your first day?" And I was like, "Kind of overwhelming, kind of crazy, like all these people and these bands and stuff." And I was just kind of telling him that. I remember he like took a breath and he sat down. And he was like, "Yeah, well, I think you got to remember is they're all just a bunch of fucking nerds, and we all shit in the same porta potty, Dom. Yeah, you don't get to be a musician without being a nerd, and all these guys are just nerds. And once you remember that, it's fine." And I was like, thanks, Warren. And he's like, no problem. And then he like left. And I was like, nice. So I remember that a lot, especially, and as I've gotten older and I've met more people and I've interacted with more musicians, the thing I will say is there's less difference between your average music nerd and music fan and musician than people think. For all her gifts, I think Taylor Swift is very much a nerd. Even the big ones, Billie Eilish, nerd.
Well, that's a good, I don't know, it's a great segue, but I think this is a segue going back into the question of how you got involved in the scene, because obviously having this passion for listening to music and making it, something had to have started that. So what brought you into this world as a teen or a non-teen?
Well, I'd been born in Northern California in this town called Petaluma. That's about an hour north of San Francisco. But then we moved back to the East Bay where the bulk of my father's family was. And I spent a bunch of time there. And then right before junior high, my family decided to go back to North Bay and take us back to Petaluma. And I remember at one point we were driving around and we were looking over at the town. We just moved there. Great time to move a kid right before junior high, as all the elementary schools go into this big melting pot. Like you have no idea. No, you know no one. We were driving around and there's this place in Petaluma called the Phoenix Theater. It's basically an old movie theater and opera house and it's like a historical building in the town, but now it does shows and concerts and plays that kids want to put on. And I think it's even a nonprofit officially now. My parents were like, "Oh wow, look, all these kids are hanging out at that theater. You should go and have fun." And literally like kicked me out of the car and said like, "Go have fun. Go hang out." I like walked in going, I don't know anyone. And there were like skateboard ramps that were built in on the floor of the theater that people were skating. There were like bands practicing. It was just a hangout spot, and it was such a cool space to have. And later I realized how lucky everybody was to have that and is to have it, and how unusual that is. All of a sudden, I was exposed like every Friday and Saturday night they do concerts, and so it would be ska shows, metal shows, punk shows, funk shows, everything. And I just was completely enamored and that's kind of how I made friends. So I became part of the North Bay punk rock scene, just sort of drifting into it, the ska and punk scene that was happening there. It was an kind of an exciting time because we were talking the early 90s. But like, Green Day had just like gotten really big. Operation Ivy had still people remembered how, had remembered when they broke up just before I got into the scene. Jawbreaker had signed and people were all mad. Green Day had signed and people were all mad, but they were blowing up, especially Green Day. And so it was just sort of a big, exciting time for that explosion of punk rock where I joined this independent scene, this underground scene, just as like parts of it were becoming into the mainstream. And the shows were so big, everybody in town, every kid in town was going to those concerts. One, it became a place that I hung out and worked at, and then decided that I wanted to start a band. I wanted to be a part of it. Initially, I had this vision that I was going to manage a band. I was going to be some sort of weird Svengali that managed and helped promote this band, but we couldn't find a bass player, so I decided that I'd learn bass. And then my father was delighted that I decided to learn bass. I think he traded some weed for a Fender Telecaster bass, which is enormous. And then it was just like one thing after another. And I just found myself getting deeper and deeper into it because you're just surrounded by all these amazing people and amazing bands. And so it kind of just pulled me in because my parents kicked me out of the car.
I love that. Was there anything intimidating about starting a band in that scene? Because me growing up, I was in a band in Jersey and we were going to Legion halls and stuff. There was really no bands around us that were like the scene and stuff. We were creating it. So there was no, we'd hear about Berkeley and we hear about Chicago. We hear about these places and we're like, man, that seems there's so much coming out of there. And we were like, well, we don't really have that. So we're going to kind of make it. But you already had an established scene. So when you're getting in a band and going to plug yourself into that, did you think that you would be accepted or not?
I think that there's this weird, crazy amount of naive confidence that it would be okay. Like I just wanted to be a part of what was going on and not just be a passive participant. I wanted to be an active participant. Initially, since I didn't know how to play music, I didn't have an instrument. Like I was just trying to help people out who were putting on shows or help work at the venue and be a part of it that way. Also, I hated crowds, which sounds ironic, but I didn't want to be in the crowd. But I still wanted to be a part of it. So I wanted to put myself backstage or somewhere that I felt more comfortable. Yeah, so I was kind of driven to be a part of it. And then I was like, well, there's not that many people on stage. So, but yeah, there was a certain amount of intimidation to do it. But then you make these weird things. Like, I remember when a friend of mine, this was before I started playing, brought over all these 7 inches and CDs, and they were all local bands. And I remember that was like right before I'd gotten start going to concerts and stuff there. And I was remember being shocked at this. There were so many bands that were these were bands that were local that I could go see them because they were playing. I remember one of my first bands, we got to play this big festival, and we had all heard this song from this band that had broken up a while ago, apparently, and we really liked it. So we covered it and we started playing it and we covered it and we really liked our cover. And then and like I said, we got to do this festival and we came out and played the festival. And it turned out that the girl who was putting on the festival, it was her band. And we had no idea. Like, I didn't have any connection that this was actually, to me, it was as removed as any band that you would buy. I didn't realize they were right there. And the entire band was there working. They pretty much put on the festival. So they were like really tickled that we had played their show and played a song of theirs. But we had no idea. So at first I was embarrassed, but then I realized how stoked everybody was. So it was just sort of like this desire to, I was naively confident that we would find something and figure it out, but I had no idea what I was doing. I was just trying to be a part of what was just seemed like such an amazing thing. And I just wanted to be a part of it. Same thing in a sense, much harder for you because you didn't have an established scene, even though it's weird to feel like there's this huge clique that you're not a part of and you're trying to be a part of it. But you created a scene because you saw all these things happening elsewhere and you're like, well, I want this. And so there's not really a hesitation. You're just like, we're going to do it. And somehow people are going to show up and somehow it's going to work, but whatever.
Well, it was like this whole thing. I mean, I got involved because I started playing a band and just showed up to a show. So I was introduced to this. I'm like, wait, we don't have to go to the Stone Pony and go to New York City. Like we can play shows here. So it was growing in this underground way, but I don't think there was no spotlight really on Jersey. And when we showed up, all the other bands were our age and there was no one was signed really. And then Bigwig blew up, which you'd probably know them because they were on Kung Fu with you guys like
Yeah.
back then.
Reluctantly on Kung Fu.
They were reluctantly on Kung Fu.
Reluctantly. Yeah. Bigwig notoriously had a really hard time with record labels and stuff. But yeah, I love Bigwig. They were great. No, I remember. See, that's so funny because there was a certain point by the time we were doing Warped Tour, I felt like I met a lot of Jersey bands. Felt like, you guys had a really cool thing going. Man, I can't believe you brought up Bigwig. I haven't thought about Bigwig in a while. I remember just recently hearing Sum 41 again. It just for randomly one of their songs came on, and I was like, man, they really owe Bigwig a lot of money. Like Sum 41 pretty much stole Bigwig's stick.
I've never heard that perspective.
I remember seeing them years ago and going, this is Bigwig. This is totally a Bigwig song. This style of metal punk, like dun-dun-dun-dun, dun-dun-dun-dun, dun-dun-dun-dun. I was like, that's Bigwig would do that. They could do that.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, and they were huge in Canada too, so that does make sense.
Oh, and I guarantee that I don't have any proof. I mean, yeah, I don't have any proof, but I remember thinking like Sum 41 totally felt. I was like, they were Bigwig fans. They must have been.
I can actually hear that now when I'm listening to, I'm thinking of like Unmarried Melodies. There's that one hardcore song that Sum 41 has. I actually just listened to his book, which was really interesting. I actually really enjoyed it. But yeah, there was some, yeah, I guess there is a little bit of that. That's wild. Okay.
And the age is correct as well. Just enough to be inspired by. I'm sure it was other things, but like, yeah, I mean, who else was like running around with that particular approach, melding the metal and punk? There's only a couple of them at that time. There was the one on Fat that was a big deal that everybody loved, but like, I don't know, I just felt like Sum 41 when it came out. I was like, Bigwig, this is Bigwig.
Propaganda?
Yeah, I mean that definitely propaganda. I was thinking somebody else. I can't think of it right now, but it's another Fat Records metal punk band that was
Strung Out?
famous for Strung Out. That's it. Strung Out and Propaganda. I definitely think they're in that mix. But for some reason, the way Sum 41 played, I was like, that's way more Bigwig.
Now I'm gonna like go down a rabbit hole with that.
I don't know. I think it was because I saw him live and I was like, yeah, this is Bigwig. That's what they must be bigwig fans.
So how does the band officially like come together? Because you guys, it says you, from what I see online, it says you guys got together in '98, and then it seems like it seems like it was pretty quickly. Well, no, I guess maybe not. It's a couple of years when before you're on Kung Fu, which would be like a pretty big label for then. What's the whole timeline here between like you guys getting together and then getting on Kung Fu? Like what's happened during that time?
We got together because I wanted to do something on my own. The band I had been in before just kind of fell apart in this blaze of accusatory and weird, toxic social stuff where friendships just became ridiculously strained and shit talking happened behind everyone's back. And it just really drove me crazy. And I just wanted to do my own thing. I got Oobliette to do stuff with me. I begged her to play guitar, but she could play guitar, but she was like, I'm not a good enough guitar player. I want to play keyboard. And I was like, keyboard? What the fuck am I going to do with a keyboard? Come on, just play guitar. And she's like, nope, I'm playing keyboard. I'm better on keyboard. And I'm like, oh, okay, fine. We created this band and we just borrowed friends and talked people into it. And, and people would fill in for us. And Gabe, the drummer, he filled in for our first few shows. And then we got a drummer. And then that drummer left. And then Gabe's band broke up. And then he joined us like a year later. We do a split with this band Plinky. And then Plinky fell apart before the split came out. So we're like, well, our singer is leaving. She's moving to Portland to go to school. So maybe Emily from Blinky will totally play. And then she's like, yeah, okay, I'll do it. Brian, our drummer, he plays guitar. And we're like, I guess Brian's playing guitar. It was like that. We're just like pulling in different members, desperately trying to keep our little band going. But then along the way, it was really like we started doing really well, and the shows locally, especially, were doing well. I remember asking Kepi from Groovy Ghoulies one time. We got a big show with them, and it was really exciting. I really liked Groovy Ghoulies. And I remember one time asking him, I was like, hey, I got a question for you. You're on Lookout Records. And he goes, yeah. Because that was originally I started Tsunami Bomb with the idea of I want to be on Lookout Records. And by the time Tsunami Bomb could have been on Lookout Records, they were kind of done. Well, at first they weren't pulling bands like they weren't signing bands, and then they kind of ended. And I was like, oh, that sucks. And I remember asking him, like, how do I get my band from we can headline shows and we can do well, but how do I get from this to where you are? Like, how do I get on a label? And he was like, well, the trick is you play with the bands on the label because independent labels don't have like A&R guys looking at stuff. The bands are the A&R guys. Like bands will say, oh yeah, there's this really good band we really like. You guys should check them out. And that's so if there's a label you want, you got to go play with all the bands on that label. Like you got to get on those shows and build what you whatever you can to do that. Play more towns and stuff and get people's attention. And I was like, oh, okay. So then I just literally went about doing that. First it was like Lookout, but then that kind of spread out to like bands on whether it would be on Nitro or Epitaph or Kung Fu or Fat and just any way I could get on opening shows. And we started playing different treks of shows. We started like, okay, what could we get done in like a long weekend? We could probably go down to Vegas and get all the way to Phoenix. And like we started getting good at getting all the way to like El Paso and come back and like within a week, and it was like so hard to do in our shitty van. But, we'd go down to Southern California and we just like do these like laps on our own. And then somebody knew somebody and then we got put on an Atari show and the Ataris didn't watch us, but all their girlfriends and wives did, and they loved us. And so then the Ataris, like those girls, which were very appreciative to, ended up convincing them to have us on another show. So then we played with them again, and then the Ataris liked us, and then we did a couple things with them, and then the Ataris were like, Christopher Rowe was like, I think you guys should be on Fat Records, and I was like, I think that would be a really cool thing. And he recommended that then he called me or sent me a message. He's like, hey, you gotta call this number and talk to Mark at Fat. And then I was like, okay. So I called and I was like, hi, I'm here to talk to Mark. And they're like, okay, hold on. And then this guy gets on, who I later knew, I forget his last name. He was a nice guy, but like I will never forget this. And he felt bad about this later, but I was like, hi, my name is Dominic. I'm in a band called Tsunami Bomb, and Chris Rowe from the Ataris told me to give you a call. And he's like, yeah, we're not interested. We don't like your name. And I was like, what? And he's like, yeah, we don't like your band name. I was like, didn't you just sign a band called Dog Piss? And he's like, yeah, that's true, we did. That's weird. It's well, that was a friend ding. And I was like, okay. And he's like, yeah, sorry, man. And I was like, okay. And that's a funny story that he felt like, and to his credit later, he was like, I'm really sorry.
Real quick, if you need a freelance graphic designer or motion designer or explainer video guy, then hit me up at mike@drive80.com. I specialize in logos, brand identity, print design, video editing, explainer videos, software demos, and a lot of other cool shit. So again, email me, mike@drive80.com, and now back to the show.
Was he just like saying that just to get you off the phone, or did he have were there people in the office who actually thought that?
I heard that their initial response to Tsunami Bomb was that they thought the name was stupid. Yeah, I was like, okay, no effects, but whatever. But no, seriously, it was funny. But like, I can tell you that every record label turned us down. Like, we got to a point where we had built up a thing. Like, I think even we got on Warped Tour the first time, and that guy, Kevin Lyman was incredibly supportive. And he's like, Tsunami Bomb's great, and he tried to hook us up with Side One Dummy, and then Side One Dummy was like, we think you guys would be better on a major. And I was like, but I don't know a major, and I wanted to just put out a record, and they're like, yeah, you should be on a major. And then like, okay, I don't know what that means. And then Epitaph told us no at the time. Somebody gave me their number, and I called them, and they're like, yeah, we don't sign. I swear to God, they said this, that we don't sign girl bands. And I was like, what? It's like, yeah, we don't sign girl bands, man. And I was like, aren't you working with the Distillers? And he goes, yeah, that's Tim's thing. And I was like, okay. I found out later that Epitaph Records, I guess, had a huge fight about that. And people were pissed, apparently. And they got in a big argument because there were a bunch of people who did want to sign us at the label, which I had no idea at the time. But the guy I talked to was the one guy that was like, nah, girl band. And I guess it was a huge fight. I that's what I heard, but I don't know for sure. But yeah, they told us initially they didn't sign girl bands because girl bands don't sell. And I was like, there are three penises in this band and one vagina, two vaginas. Sorry, two. I was like, I don't know. This seems like a really shitty thing to say. Even back then, when things were shitty for women in punk rock, it was really weird. And everybody said no. Every single fucking label said no. And they always have. They said no again, like this last time.
Were you guys playing enough? Because it's pretty wild where you're starting off, you're talking about the band starting, and then all of a sudden people are like, you should be on, Chris from Atari's like, you should be on Fat. And then,
Well, I'm truncating a lot of time here of a couple years of just like playing shows and starting to meet people and get to know people from playing, building up crowds and draw from doing our own stuff.
so there was time.
Yeah, and we had gotten discovered. So first, what happened? Tsunami Bomb's trajectory is all based on actual musicians seeing us play in real life. So like Hunter from AFI saw us when we were still doing local shows. And he was like, hey, I have a little label I'm calling Checkmate Records. He had started a little, I think they only did a couple records. He wanted to put out a 7-inch from us. That's how the AFI crowd kind of discovered us, is that Hunter, their bassist, they were from there too, and said, all right, I want to put your stuff out. And that got us, I think we got lucky and got like a show or two with AFI, and a lot of AFI fans who were super rabid at the time, was great because they were fantastic, started discovering us. And then from doing those shows, from that boost and starting to play more, we ran into the drummer from Skank and Pickle, who I really loved. And that was definitely an influence on us. He was like, hey, I have a label called Tomato Head. I'd like to put out an EP with you guys. So he did an EP CD for us called The Invasion from Within on Tomato Head Records. And he had been partners with Mike Park from Skank and Pickle when they had Dill Records for their own label, but then they ended up splitting it off where Mike Park started Asian Man and Chuck Phelps started Tomato Head. And they still helped each other, but they were like sister labels. And for a while, Tomato Head was doing really well, which was like just as good as Asian Man. But a couple setbacks kind of killed that label out financially, which was really too bad because it was a really cool thing. So for the longest time, that's all we had. We had the 7-inch from Checkmate Records and the CD from Tomato Head. We toured our first tours that we did was just with 7 inches, which was insane to do. in the 90s and in the early 2000s when everyone was playing CDs. So it took forever to sell those 7 inches. But then we got that CD and that was a big deal and that really helped. And then that led to Atari seeing us and them trying to help us and push us to all these labels and all those labels saying no. And then finally, the Ataris got us a show with the Vandals, and Joe actually saw us. So the Vandals said like, "Hey, we need a band to open for us on this Southwest run." And luckily, that had been the run that we had been doing for years on our own, where we would go out and play like Las Vegas, Phoenix, Santa Fe, New Mexico. We played Albuquerque and El Paso, and that's pretty much what the dates were. So we went there and we got all new merch. I don't know if we had been out there with the CD yet or something. Some sort of combination of events led to the fact that the Vandals shows, we had a ton of people showing up that knew all of our songs. So the Vandals saw this opening band that they got convinced to add to their shows that actually had all these people singing along and going crazy. And they were like, dude, we haven't seen a band with a female singer get this kind of reaction since No Doubt. And that was kind of a fun comparison in that sense because they were like, those are the only guys that get this kind of response. So then Joe Escalante was super serious, interested in us and said, "Hey, we'd like to bring you over to Kung Fu Records." So they were the only ones that, and that was kind of honestly Jello too. When we came back more recently, I think because we had the new singer, I think I know because we had the new singer that all these record labels were unsure. So all of a sudden, like a bunch of people that I actually now know got real quiet when I asked them about like, hey, is there any interest in you guys picking up Tsunami Bomb? Silence. They didn't even want to tell me no. They just didn't respond to my message or my call. They like there are some cases, and I'm not going to call out people, but like where they would respond to anything else I said or asked, except for, hey, would you be interested in anything with by Tsunami Bomb? You guys want to hear it? Silence. And I was like, okay. And Jello saw us live because he came out and he was just like, I think it's awesome. And that's how we got. So it's like it's easy to sit here and be like, oh yeah, we got on this and we did this and we did that. But like it was really hard to convince these people to get behind it. And it was only when actual musicians who saw us live was like, hey, I have a label I'll put you out on. And that's the only way Tsunami Bomb has ever been able to get on any label, even now.
I can understand the current situation because you have a new singer, and I think labels would be like, when you do get a new singer, when Kate's in the band, you guys start playing shows. Did your fan base? I mean, if you've been playing for so long, did your fan base kind of was there a divide at all, or people were like, "Fuck it, we don't care."
Oh, there was totally divide. Look, well, initially we had tried to get Emily to do it, but she just didn't want to. And the rest of us, we only wanted to just play some songs. My original idea, I got Gabe and Courtney both to Oubliette both to say that they were interested in doing a project. So my plan was for us to do a new band completely and just play Tsunami Bomb stuff. But it was kind of the vote. We also had Brian back for a while. What was happening was Kung Fu at the time wanted to release a collection of all of the early unreleased, the stuff for like Invasion from Within, the early 7 inches, Mayhem on the High Seas, and B Movie Queens wanted to collect that and put it out as a collection. I had all these my friends all interested in playing with each other, but they kind of all decided there was kind of this push to just make it Tsunami Bomb. And then when Emily didn't want to do it, I was like, well, maybe we go back to my plan of just doing a new project. Everybody kind of felt like, well, maybe we should just do a couple shows. So originally it was only supposed to be a couple shows as Tsunami Bomb to just kind of promote the old stuff. And then we were gonna go do a new project and just kind of go forward. What ended up happening is every time we played a show, it was like first all of our friends were like, yeah, this is Tsunami Bomb. This feels like Tsunami Bomb, like completely. And then we played shows and everybody was like, the shows went so well. Like anytime we played, it went great. And I mean, I'm sure there were people out there that were like, saw us and were like, no, it's not the same. But like for the most part, the majority of the feeling that we were getting and the response we were getting was incredible. So we were like really stoked. And for the most part, people seemed like they really loved Kate. She was doing a great job and she was really, really impressive and has only become more so. but that was live. And so then we kept getting asked to do more and more things. And it like until we got asked to do Warp Tour again. And we did like 2 or 3 days on Warp Tour in 2016, 17, 2016 or 17. We did like a few dates. Kevin put us on the main stage and people went nuts. And then there was this huge line of kids that had never seen us before asking for, we were doing signings for like hours. And it was such an insane response. I remember walking around Warped Tour that year and just watching all the bands and going, there is nobody like us. Like nobody that's doing what we're doing. And that kind of convinced me to be, okay, I'll just embrace being Tsunami Bomb. So I didn't get my wish of us becoming our own band and stepping away from that. So at that point, I was like, all right, I'm just going to embrace being Tsunami Bomb. But I can say all of that of how positive it was. And then online, it was the opposite, where everybody was like, what is this bullshit? What you has been fucks coming back with some new person? Like that's where it was really toxic and really uncool. Like a lot of people said some very uncool things to, about a person, Kate, who really didn't deserve it and was really cool. Especially like a YouTube seemed to be the number one place that everybody was like, what is this? How dare they? How dare this sucks. That's where it was rough. So we'd get this like crazy dichotomy where live we'd have this really amazing response, and then online everybody would be like, bullshit.
I mean, people can hide all their bullshit, they can hide behind a screen name and talk as much shit as they want.
Yeah, yeah. Well, also, I think it's mostly people who weren't there. Like I said, I'm sure there were people who showed up and were like, nah, this isn't the same. It's not what I was looking for. And honestly, I would just try and address it honestly. Like, okay, well, if you don't hear it, that's fine. And you can change your mind later if you hear us play a song you like and decide you like it. You don't have to support it if you don't want to. It's okay. You can listen to all the other records. But because we played all of the records, like I remember when we started, I made a joke about how I never wanted to be found in a dollar bin, and then I got calls from friends that found The Ultimate Escape in a dollar bin, and then I went to a record store and found Tsunami Bomb in a dollar bin, which was great. I was like, "Oh, that's so cool! Look at that!" And because we were playing, all those records got reissued and put back out and back into circulation, and so it was kind of like a win-win. I was just like, well, the good news is you don't have to listen to the new stuff. You can just focus on these cool new editions of the old stuff and just focus on that. I definitely don't recommend bands doing this. I mean, Kate is an incredibly brave and impressive person. I wonder if she would still have done it knowing what she knows now and what she was going to have to do. It took a long while before people felt like they fully like a lot of that has died down. I mean, you still get some of it online where somebody's like, I hate this. But for the most part, we've been around so long now. Like Kate's been the singer in the band way longer than Emily was.
She going 10 years now?
Yeah, 10 years, which is crazy. This freaking band. But I think that was kind of what won some people over or quieted it down was like it wasn't just obviously a cash grab. Clearly we love doing it. We're doing it because we are and we're having fun and the shows have gone well. I'm sure it would have been maybe bigger at first if we had come back with Emily, but I don't know if it would have been sustainable with the personalities in the band, and I think Emily made the right choice for herself to not don't I wouldn't want her to do it if she wasn't fully into doing it. And I think Kate's been amazing and she's come a really long way. But yeah, it was hard. Also because I felt like the others would like play the shows and then go back to their jobs and they weren't really in the scene, whereas I was working at AT, and so I was getting it all the time. And I'd see people be like, "What is Dominic trying to pull?" And I was like, "Me? Like, dude, I just wanted to play in a band with my friends." Yeah, well, I mean, I was just like, I just want to play, I wanted to do a new band, but whatever. But then, ultimately the final thing that I ended up saying to people is like, well, it's mine to ruin. It's mine to ruin. If I'm ruining it, then it's up to me to ruin it.
Did you ever dive into the comments on YouTube and start replying?
Initially, yes. Initially, but I made a rule for everybody, and I was like, you are never, ever, ever to badmouth any former member. We are only going to be positive. Because I watched the Dead Kennedys and how that had played out. So I was like, we're not doing that. We were just always complimentary. Emily's doing what she wants to do, and you should support her. And here's her music. Go over here. We're just trying to enjoy ourselves. So we didn't try to like fight people, but like, when people were really going in on it and like felt like people were demanding explanations and piling in, like there might not be an interview or anything out there that kind of tells its story. So some of us would reply, but eventually I was like, okay, everybody knock it off. Like, let's just let it. It doesn't matter. We're not going to fuel this fire. So after initially we would respond just to basically explain like, hey, we're just trying to have fun doing our thing. You don't have to like it, and you could listen to the old stuff. But then nowadays we don't respond because it's like it's no point. 10 years on, if you're still angry about it, I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, and also you're probably in your 30s then when you were doing this, and you're like,
Well, at a certain point, some of these people aren't actually going to shows. They aren't seeing it. They don't want to see it. Are they even going to shows? I could sit here and fight with some 40-year-old behind a keyboard, or I could, see this kid who's in their teens or 20s who just saw the band and is like so excited to talk to Kate. So I'm just like, okay, well, it's fine. And ultimately, we're not trying to like do anything insane or present ourselves or trick people. That was the hard part at first, is to just make sure like nobody used the wrong pictures and nobody was like trying to promote this, trying to make it clear what was happening.
what's the difference between the live shows with both singers?
Oh, the difference? That's interesting. Nobody's ever asked that question. I think that Emily Emily, as a Agent M, where is a great front person. She was a fantastic songwriter. Her lyrics were really good and interesting, and her performances were really good. She really emulated. She had a tough time because she had to play during a time when there were not a lot of female punks fronting bands. So every comparison she got was to Gwen Stefani all the time, which was really annoying. But like I think she leaned in really hard. Like she picked up a lot of nuances from Davey Havok and a lot of and Green Day and stuff, a lot of stuff that she pulled in. Like I'd watch her lean over, wind a mic around her hand, a mic cable when she used cables, a lot like Davey Havok would. So she was really incorporating a lot of really cool stuff and was very polished. I thought she was just always, she was always a really strong front person in that way. And she was really good at, she knew what she wanted to say and how she said it. And she really believed in what she said. And she was really honest about who and what kind of performer she was. And I think that's what drew people to her. And she purposely sang stuff in a genderless way. She wanted men to hear the songs and still feel like it could be about them. She didn't want to overly feminize anything. She really tried to make it open to all and express things that we all feel. Whereas now with Kate, I would say when you watch Kate, you are watching somebody who is doing something purely for the love of doing it. And her joy is inescapable. And it comes across on stage like you see somebody who is having so much fun getting to sing and perform in this band that she loved and still loves. Like when Kate joined, she made us autograph all of her Tsunami Bomb stuff, which was really weird. It's kind of funny. But like she just this is inescapable joy. And I think as she has become more polished and more experienced, she has become better at being a front person and kind of commanding the stage, which didn't come naturally to her to command it. But what came natural to her and her performance, I think she has a very strong voice and a really strong presence, and her lyrics and her songwriting is much more, it's definitely much more internal, and a lot of the turmoil that she is personally going to. Like you can tell when she's angry what she writes angry songs. Like she's very again another honest performer. But I would say that with her, there's a lot more joy. Like she is smiling from ear to ear. She has a hard time looking tough or trying to be tough because she's having too much fun doing it. So I think Kate is a much more infectious. With Emily, you got really earnest, polished performances of a front person. With Kate, you get just joy, and it's infectious and honest.
Yeah, I'm like watching as you're talking. I have my cursors rolling over the old or thumbnails on YouTube of like the old performances with them, and just kind of like watching her perform. And I'm like trying to find all the ones with. I was watching some with Kate before, but she just seemed so happy when she was playing.
Yeah, some people criticized her before at first for that because they're like, she's just like smiling through these songs, these dark songs. Like she can't pretend to be all intense. Like she can't do it. She's having the time of her life there, and it just it's infectious. So I think that's Kate's strongest ability is that her joy is so infectious and honest. And then on top of it, she's now after 10 years in, she's an incredibly polished singer. This was her first band. She had never done it before then, which can I cannot tell you how stressful that was going into it, going, oh God, she has no idea what she's getting herself into.
Yeah, and then also getting shit on by people too, which is like, what the fuck?
Yeah, it was a lot of that. And so like I said, like she's incredibly strong to be able to get through all that. I can't believe it.
When you guys, well, I was reading something, I was just kind of like briefly going over some things, and it said that you guys are basically, and I think I remember this too, because I would see all these comps and stuff. You guys are became quite the staple on Warped Tour, right? You play all the time.
Yeah,
Do you ever listen to the Lawrence Arms?
yeah.
So Brendan, he had this podcast and he talked about it was like 2000, I think it was like late 2000s, and he was talking about being on the Warped Tour and how shitty it become, and these bands were just such fucking idiots. Did it ever change for you because the beginning of 2000 into like progressing into like 2009, 2000 whatever it was? Did you see like a change in Warped Tours where it just became kind of shitty, or did you not see it that way?
Both. Both. I wasn't as negative towards it. The one of the differences is I realized that it's not actually Warped Tour that changed so much as it was the scene and the people. Like they changed.
That's what I'm saying, like the people there and the bands and stuff like that. That's what I meant.
Yeah, but the people, the fans, everybody changed. And Kevin Lyman has talked about it. Like there was a shift. The new bands were different in personality and what they were looking for. The rise of social media and the drive of influencers and how that affected what bands were doing and how they approached it versus people who came up in a punk scene purely for the punk scene. And then the tastes of the kids changed to bands that were different from what had come before. So the whole vibe was shifting, and eventually Kevin Lyman felt like it wasn't going to be Warped Tour anymore if he kept it up. It was burning him out. It was getting too hard to get the same vibe going. Originally, the way the Warped Tour was able to occur is you have a bunch of bands agreeing to take less to get to reach more. You're not going to get paid as much as you might on your own tour, but you're going to reach such a larger group of people and benefit from the scene. And then you have Kevin Lyman, there's also a whole warped experience for artists that is unlike what everyone else gets, where there are these barbecues that you get to go to where every band is there and hanging out, eating barbecue after every show. And then they all get on buses and vans and go to the next one. And so it's a real communal circus aspect. And then what was happening was you had bands that were now getting a different, it had shifted in the years to follow where people were now realizing, well, you need us more than we need you on a negotiation standpoint where bands weren't willing to take less. They wanted more. If you want us on this, like we're pretty hot right now, and I'm not even saying that these are the band members, these are the agents and managers who are like, nah, man, they draw a lot. They can make this much on their own. If you want them on this tour, you got to pay them more. And then that starts cutting into how much money they have for everybody else. You could sit there and be like, oh, Warped Tour, but you're still talking about 20 to 30 bands at one time at various levels playing a ton of shows for what was it, $20, $30 ticket? It wasn't working. So the prices were having to get raised. Then you get these bands, then they don't want to hang out because the people have changed. Like I would say, like later generations that have come out. This sounds such like an old guy thing, but it's facts. It's facts that newer generations are less likely to be social in person. So you had bands, literally the bands were pulling away from that. They didn't want to barbecue anymore. They didn't want to show up to the barbecue. They weren't interested in that experience. It wasn't the days of Fat, Epitaph, Kung Fu, Side One Dummy, all these record labels that had all these bands that were all BYO, that were all being tossed together and everyone knew each other. It was a different era. So I think it's easy to sit there and go like, oh yeah, Warped Tour sucked, started sucking and changed. I was like, nah, man, you guys changed. The kids changed. The people in the bands that started bands changed. And then it changed. The vibe was changed. It makes sense. It can only last so long. These scenes, these are moments. We were lucky to be a part of that, all of us. But yeah, it's a very different scene now. I mean, I'm glad that Warped Tour is back, but it's different. I haven't done one of the events yet. They haven't asked us yet. I say yet because I'm hopeful they might, and I'll get to see it in person. And I'm sure it's a good time. And maybe it's different, but I noticed that they're not taking it on the road. They're just doing a bunch of Warped Tour West Coast, Warped Tour East Coast, kind of events because it's not sustainable. And then the prices changed. I mean, things we don't talk about. When Tsunami Bomb was touring at first time, it took $100. We get paid $100, and that would fill a tank of a 15 passenger van twice. And now people still pay young bands $100 to play a show, and that does not fill a 15-gallon tank of gas at all for a van. Like it doesn't do it. 15 passenger van's tank of gas is not even filled with $100. So money changed too. So there's a bunch of things that changed that killed that Warped Tour vibe. So yes, he was right, but I think he blames the wrong thing.
Were you guys in a van or a bus when you were touring through Warped Tour?
Mostly a van. The one year we split a bus with Rise Against. Yeah, it was fun.
I guess I was just thinking that because if you're gonna tour that much and just doing those drives, where if you're doing a good portion of Warped Tour, it's gonna get pretty grueling.
It's exhausting. Yeah, it was so rough in a van. It was rough because you're driving all night while everyone else is sleeping in a bus with a driver. And so, one of us was taking the hit to get to the next thing and then sleeping the next day as much as they could.
When you guys were on Kung Fu, like how did the label work for you guys? What did they do for you? Was it a positive? I mean, it sounds like it would be a positive experience since you worked for them.
Yeah, I thought it was a positive experience. I think later, they cited when Tsunami Bomb broke up in 2005 after I'd left the band, they cited problems with the music industry and with their label and stuff. And I was like, I thought that was sort of misleading statement because a lot of people figured that was like Kung Fu's thing, but it was just more like what had happened was is that Tsunami Bomb had gotten rid of all of their songwriters and it wasn't the same band anymore and it wasn't able to do it was having struggling to deliver material that people were excited about because the members that were in it wanted to change it to something that it wasn't, which ultimately they ended the band and started other projects, which I think is what they should have done. I think behind the scenes, they tried to make Tsunami Bomb into a different kind of band that they wanted it to be rather than what it was. And that wasn't going over as well as they'd want it to be, wanted it to go. And then, so then they're like, well, we're citing problems with the music industry. But in my experience, Kung Fu was a great label. There was definitely an excitement around that label, and the bands they were trying, the little corner of punk rock that they were trying to carve out for themselves. It was a fun time and a fun thing to be a part of. But I mean, I got to know all the people who work there, maybe in ways that other people didn't. So I got to know them all as people who just really passionately cared about the scene and passionately cared about what they were doing in it. They were excited. I liked them. I thought it was a great label. I think they had curated a really cool, they had leaned into the whole pop punk thing really hard, but I think it made sense. It's funny that they didn't go as wacky and crazy. Like you would think with the Vandals starting a label that they would be even kind of, there'd be a lot more weirdness to it. But I think that they kind of created a really good pop punk label for that time period. There were a lot of really cool bands on it that were doing really neat and fun things. Some who I didn't think that were appreciated until later, you know. It's like I think Audio Karate was doing a lot more interesting things than they were given credit for, especially like with Lady Melody, you know, and things like I think they were getting somewhere. But like I think it was a really good experience. It was really exciting, you know, it was exciting to go down there. You know, I remember when we first were going down there, Skinhead Rob was their intern, the guy who sang in the band that woohoo with Tim Armstrong and
Oh, the fucking yeah, with Travis Barker.
yeah.
They had that song that was on all those hair product commercials, or whatever that was.
Yes. Transplants.
Transplants.
Jesus
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Christ. Yeah, but he was the intern at Kung Fu Records when we like first started coming around. So it was, you know, like it's just sort of it felt very much it was exciting to go down to Southern California and go visit them and see what they were doing and check out their offices and then talk to them because they always seemed like they had stuff going on. And for them it was just all the people that they had grown up with. It was their own little scene with a lot more eyes on it. While as us, we were just like, oh my God, this is so cool. You know, you'd run into all these people and meet all these people. So it was always exciting.
What was the split that you guys had? I know you said you were in the band, but I thought I read in your Wikipedia. I'm trying to find it right now. I can't find it. But like she didn't she leave the band with another member?
That was when they ended in 2005. In 2003, like after the Warp Tour, we did the whole Warp Tour with the van with the bus with Rise Against, and we split the bus with them, and then we did the whole thing. And then at the end of the Warp Tour, they sat me down and said, like, "Hey, I don't think we want to play with you anymore." And I'm like, "What?" I think it came from a couple things where we had been talking about whether the direction of the band was going to go. They started showing me some songs that Mike had written, and they were good, but I remember listening to them and I'm like, this sounds like Thrice. Like this is a Thrice song. And then they get kind of mad, and I was like, I'm sorry, it is. It's a Thrice song. You can't chase what they're doing. And then they play something else and it'd be like somebody else. And I was like, this is like so and so. Like I can't Look, I can't listen to your demos and get excited about a song when I can name one band this sounds like. It has to sound like a bunch, like you got to give me something, like you got to mix more into it. We can take this and we can work on it. But I can't, you just wrote Thrice songs. And then I remember Thrice on that tour, they came, a couple of them, we were friends with them. They came in on the bus and we are all hanging out. And then he played them the demo and he's like, oh, wow, that sounds like something we would have done. And I was like, right? And that didn't go over well. So, and then around while they were kind of chasing a direction that was kind of along the lines of a lot of the bands in the scene that we were friends with and we were a part of, but we didn't sound like, I was writing very different kinds of things where I was trying to reincorporate some of the sound that we had kind of started to move away from with Ultimate Escape and kind of bring back in some Invasion from Within feel back into the songs. And I had talked about how I would like to potentially consider trying to find Oobliette and seeing if she'll come back. If we could, you know, work things out with her. And if she wouldn't do it, maybe find somebody else to play a keyboard and bring that element back into the band. And I don't think that was the direction specifically that Emily and Mike wanted to go. And so I think that led to a schism among other things, just like personality of the fact that we toured ourselves into the ground. And I think there were starting to be resentments about that. That started leading to a split between myself and the rest of the band at the time.
What was that gap before the band you get back involved and it moves forward till today? Or am I skipping over things?
Well, no, they'd continued on for about 2 more years. They released another record, The Definitive Act, which I think that record was the definitive act after cutting me loose or not working with me. And there was a lot of fighting behind the scenes over what the control of Tsunami Bomb was as an entity. I never relinquished control. So like while I was the irony of my leaving, getting pushed out of the band was like, yeah, they didn't want to play with me, but I still owned the band because I had started it before any of them were in it. And I had come up with the name before any of them were in it. and I did not relinquish control of it. So I was still technically a band member, but like a silent partner, which is weird because a bunch of people convinced me to let them keep going, which I don't know how I feel about today when I look back on that decision, if that was the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do. So I never gave up control of Tsunami Bomb, and at most the control ended up to being split. When it all said and done, the way it fell out was the control of Tsunami Bomb was Emily, myself, Emily, and Gabe. And we never went to court over it. It was one, what was the point? Two, also didn't need to happen. But it was decided that anything that was going to happen with Tsunami Bomb was going to have to be decided by at least a majority of that three. So they continued on for a while, but then ultimately broke up when I guess they just weren't getting the response that they wanted out of the things they wanted to do. So it went dormant for a long time. They got back together for a show like 2009 or something to benefit someone, but that was it. Around like 2013 and 14, I started kind of burying the hatchet with Gabe and with Courtney Oubliette, and we all started talking again. And then my involvement with Kung Fu Records led me to interacting with them. And like Kung Fu was like, Tsunami Bomb still sells a lot of records. I know you have a bunch of unreleased stuff. You guys should think about bringing it out again. And which led me to talking to them. That's kind of what I mentioned before about how everybody was like, well, maybe we should do something if we release all this. And everybody basically agreed to put out the old stuff. Like managed to contact Emily through Brian and contact Brian, and they agreed that they'd like to put out the old stuff. That allowed this compilation called Trust No One to move forward, and then that led to Courtney, Gabe, and I's conversation about, and then Brian getting involved with that because we were talking to him about the comp, going from maybe doing something brand new to maybe we should talk about like playing a couple shows of Tsunami Bomb to help draw attention to the comp and the old stuff. And so that's kind of how it all evolved back. And then once Gabe and I agreed to doing that, that was the majority of the partnership that controlled Tsunami Bomb. And then eventually, by virtue of not wanting to be involved at all, Emily's kind of relinquished her control over Tsunami Bomb, and now it's become a whole separate entity. Though any royalties and stuff, we make sure she gets paid everything. That's been very important to me that everybody gets royalties that they deserve. So it's not like she's benefited from it, from the increased sales of the old stuff and things like that. So
So it doesn't sound like you guys had the smoothest relationship as a band back in the day.
no, I mean we started out all really close, but I think you can be toured into the ground a bit. I tell this to bands all the time now, especially the ones that I've met that are like blowing up, where I'm like, just remember, nobody tells you to take a break. And every opportunity is going to sound like a once in a lifetime opportunity. But like your managers and your agents, they're not going to mean to do this to you, but they will tour you into the ground because they make money while you're being active. If you don't watch out for your own mental health, you're going to start looking at each other like you guys are the enemy and you're not. You're going to start looking at each other like you guys are the problem. Like everything would be better if that guy wasn't in the band. And it's like, that's not how it actually is. I mean, sometimes it is, but no, you're just getting toured into the ground. You're tired. You're exhausted. Make sure to protect your own peace and understand it's okay to take breaks and let some things breathe. But I mean, tell that to a bunch of people who are like, okay, you're going to do Warp Tour for 10 weeks. And then you're going to come back for 2 weeks. And then Bad Religion is offering you a week. And it's like, oh my God, that's amazing. A week after that, you can actually do a tour with The Damned for another 2 weeks. And I was like, okay. And then you can come home for another a week. But then we got an offer from Melancholy, who wants to do a US tour and they'd like to play with you. And you're just like, wait, I'm home for 3 weeks over the course of 6 months, 10 months. Oh my God, that's what happens. That's what happened to us. One great tour after another, one great opportunity after another. Oh, go to Europe, go to Japan, go to across the US. Okay, back. Okay, go, go, go. I don't care if you're it's Mr. Rogers in your band. You're going to eventually go like, Rogers, you suck. And I'm tired of hearing you talk.
Was there like a moment though? Was there a moment on one of the because all those tours sound amazing. Was there a moment when let's say you're out for a week with Bad Religion and you're going, I'm unhappy. I should probably pay attention to that because we're fucking out with Bad Religion.
What happens is, from my experience with other bands and other musicians and even myself, is what happens. It's not like that. It's more like, why am I unhappy? You start feeling guilty that you're tired or you're frustrated or unhappy because this is what you've always wanted. What's your problem? What's wrong with you? And then you're like, well, what's wrong with me that nothing makes me happy? I've seen that starting to happen with people and they get depressed. This is all I've ever wanted. Like, what the fuck? But you're fucking tired because it's hard. It is tiring. I don't mean to sit here and go, oh, whoa, me. These guys are having these huge tours. Well, it sucks to be them. I was like, yeah, but it does. Because it's like, yeah, it's awesome. But it's also, it's driving all night to make the show the next day. Whereas the other bands are in buses. It's not very much money split among a lot of people. So it's like, oh, woe is me. I got to tour. I got to do all these really great tours and it grinded my band into the ground. Well, yeah, it grind anyone into the ground after long enough. If somebody's not protecting your mental state, allowing you to like rest, calm, or just relax, it's like I went into debt because I wasn't home to pay bills. It wasn't like back when I was touring a lot. The internet was not set up to pay your bills. So I was like in debt all the time. I come back and I'd be like rushing to pay everything I could with what money I could. And then I'd like have barely anything left. So then I'd have to like immediately go work to try and earn up a bunch of money while I was home for however short amount of time that I was home. Yeah, all right. I'm not saying everybody should be like, oh, wah, poor musicians, but it's like, yeah, it's not easy, fuckers. It's not. It's not easy to do this. And I don't care if you're Britney Spears, Taylor Swift, or you're that small punk band you saw open for somebody else the other night. It's hard and it grinds you, and they just want you to keep going. I remember watching Britney Spears, speaking of her, freak out, shave her head, and attack a car with the umbrella of the press, and I was like, yeah, I get it. I get it. Yeah, she's a special case. But then everyone was like, when are you going to play again? When are you going to do more? You got to do more. That's how you make money. You got to do more. It's like, yeah, I'm sure that yeah, that she's also another case. But it's like, come on, man. You know a bunch of musicians and artists. It's like, they're not exactly the most mental stable people all the time.
Do you guys play anything from the definitive act?
Yeah, yes, we do. We do play stuff from the definitive act. For a while, we felt uncomfortable doing so because so many of us that were originally started the band and involved in its development were not involved with it. Only Gabe was on that record, our drummer. And so it felt a little weird. But I had a conversation with Mike a couple years ago where he and I kind of buried the hatchet together about our time. We had a good talk, and he said that if you don't play those songs, who will? Who's going to? While I have complicated feelings about that record, because that's the record they tossed me out so they could do. So it's like I'm not exactly endeared to it. There are a lot of people who really do love that record and feel that that is a very strong Tsunami Bomb album and part of their Tsunami Bomb experience. So traditionally, we haven't played a ton of songs from it, but we definitely have been more likely to incorporate songs from it lately than ever. We try to treat it with the respect it deserves and take that seriously. Because if you're going to be Tsunami Bomb, you have to be Tsunami Bomb and take on those songs. Though it is funny to play a song that I'm like, yeah, this song's about me. But that's kind of Tsunami Bomb writes a lot of songs about ourselves in a passive aggressive way. We've done that multiple times and still do it. Like there's a song on the new album. I'm like, yeah, thanks, Oobliette. I know what you're saying there. There's messages to each other in our songs often.
Interesting. I don't think I've ever heard that.
But it is weird to play a song from Definitive Act that's basically talking about how good the band is without me.
What song is that?
Uh the
Safety song?
yeah, no. It's here, I'll look it up one
I'm
second.
just like trying to figure it out from the name of it. It's like, fuck that guy. Oh, that's the song.
Uh it is I'm looking up so I think being all right, I think. It's so funny the thing that you don't nobody ever talks about is how little you look up. My fiance made fun of me one time with like, wait, what do you mean you don't know that song? Or like a song. Like you wrote. you wrote it. And I was like, yeah, I wrote it a long time ago. Like, I haven't looked at it in a long time. Yes, yes. I am talking about being all right. When things are bad as they can be, dark curtains rise so everyone can see. The sun sinks to the west and blue fills the sky, and everyone feels great relief. The change in wind has changed our lives, and nobody knows what's in your future. Through death and unhappiness are uncertain. At least one thing I can say for sure, honesty is the perfect cure for any stress-induced disease you have. Believe what you do is right, explain your reasonings, and everything is going to be all right. Hey, fuck you, Emily. Fuck off. I remember when I saw that when it came out, I was like, oh, fuck you. But fair is fair. I don't always get, as a bassist, you don't always get to write lyrics to respond. But I have had some opportunity to do so. So, but yeah, I mean, it's how she felt at the time. But yeah, we played that song, and I'm like, I think I one time, the last time we played it I think we might have played it at Fest recently, but I was like, hey, this song's about me and how everyone's better off without me. And then and Gabe always like laughs. He's like, yeah, that's true. That's what it's about. But then Oubliette has to do the same thing. El Diablo's about her. There's a couple songs that are about her on The Ultimate Escape. So she has to do it too. She's like, I have to do it. And I was like, yeah, you have to do it. Yeah, nothing like passive aggressive. Yeah, this is totally. I think what does it say? I think about what's going on, and then I stop thinking about it. I have reason to believe that something's wrong, but it was only you for so long. The people ask, but I don't hear. What was the question anyway? I collect a fuzzy cloud of memories to sell to people who care, because it's not worth the time or energy. Take us for granted, and you get what you ask for. Go and don't look back at what you know. Now it's over, and this chapter has been closed. I was like, God damn. And yeah, and Oubliette's like, yeah, fuck you. And that's a popular song. So it's like she has to play that all the time. She has a really good keyboard part for it. The worst part was is she helped write that before she left, and then it became about her. And that is totally about her. Yeah, there's a lot of passive aggressive songs in Tsunami Bomb. That's like we're like Fleetwood Mac level of interpersonal songs, passive aggressive attacks on each other. To this day, there's tons. It's all over the songs.
What's a recent one?
A recent one would be in it would be Petaluma. So I just read you El Diablo off Spine That Binds. There's a song called Petaluma, and the lyrics. So basically, it's Courtney's response. It's Oubliette's response of what it's like that time for her. And there's things that are directly with mentioned to me. It says, with adventure in her eyes, she turned from their advice, believing her happily ever after wasn't that far away. A story as old as time isolated herself to disguise how she lost herself along the way. Follow your heart until it breaks in two. One step is all it takes. She'll never look back, no matter what the demons she finds along the way. She's leaving again to an empty space. Her pride holds her hostage the entire way. Follow your heart until it breaks in two.
So I guess they get along currently.
Oh yeah, they're real close. And the part that I listened to that I felt like was straight to me was her spirit buried in the tunnel, her soul left on the stage, her reflection dwindling on the river as she walked away. You didn't think she'd go, but you never asked her to stay. That's to me. And I was like, ouch. Yeah, no, I get it. I wish I had asked you to stay. Yes, sorry about that. So, yeah, there's a lot. For somebody, if ever anyone was to choose to deep dive into Tsunami Bomb songs, there's a lot of references to things about ourselves. We basically tell our entire story in our songs and how our anger is. And Emily still does it. She does it on her own albums. I think she wrote a song about me called Stay Dead. And I was like, wow, that's rude.
So that's her new band that she's in.
Survival Guide is her solo project. Yeah. So yeah, there's a lot of passive aggressive. That's not the only passive aggressive song on Spine That Binds. So we
Do people know that and like when they listen to you, or is that something that you only find out in interviews like this?
I don't think people know that. I mean, I don't think so. I mean, I've had a couple times where people are like, "Is that song about you?" A lot of people came to me and said, "Is Four Robots and a Scientist about you? An evil scientist about you?" And I was like, "No, it's about the producer of The Ultimate Escape, who was a dick." I was like, "I'm one of the robots, asshole." Thanks. I'm sure there are some people out there who paid that close attention. But normally, what I see with Tsunami Bomb fans, everybody thinks that we're like a big secret. Like Vice just came out with an article saying like three underappreciated bands from the early 2000s or pop punk bands, and we were one of them. And it was really sweet. But it's like that. Everybody thinks that they're the only person that's heard of us or they're the only person that likes us. So it's a very personal thing to be a fan of Tsunami Bomb, I think the people who like it really like it, but it's not like, not no effects or Blink or anything. Like, so it's a very focused group of people who really love it. And then of those people, I tend to find that those who do deep dives into the lyrics do it, but then feel how much it applies to themselves. It's a really huge thing to hear that somebody hears our songs and feels like it spoke to them and helped them. One of the things that really made me happy was how many trans kids have come up to me and have told me over the years, like, how much the songs meant to them and felt like it really captured that not feeling right in their own skin and how isolated they feel and how hard of a space that they've had and that some of our songs have really spoken to them in that regard. So that's been a really amazing experience to hear that. But yeah, I think most of the time, because of the way the songs are written, a lot of people feel like a more connection to that emotion and how it applies to themselves rather than, oh, is this actually about a bunch of people who are mad at each other in a band? But seeing how they feel isolated emotionally in their own lives, which is wonderful. I'd rather it be that. I'd rather that be the effect of the songs than anything. So that's been really nice. But yeah, I think if anybody, it would be funny to hear somebody realizing, oh wait, they're talking about each other, which maybe somebody now listening to this will now know that.
Yeah, we've unlocked or Pandora's
Unlock the
box.
secret thing that we talk crap about each other. Our first song ever was about my old band. So it's not like I think I set the tone with Lemonade because that's all about me leaving a crappy band and realizing the situation was too toxic to even exist in anymore. I think it's a long standing Tsunami Bomb tradition to sing songs about each other and our friends that we're mad at.
It's quite the passive aggressive band. I like it.
Yeah, that's why it was always funny when people were like, "Hey, can you dedicate this song to my friend and or to my girlfriend?" And I was like, "Do you hate her? Seriously, like that's not like you're basically we're telling somebody that they're the worst thing ever. And you want me to go, "Hey, this goes out to Jim's girlfriend. Sorry." You listening to the words? So
This question's been kind of coming and going in these interviews, but I think this might bring up a good one. Is there a story you've never told in an interview that you'd like to tell now?
oh, hmm. I have lots of stories, and there's plenty of things that I've never told in an interview. Well, I did give you one earlier. I didn't. I haven't told. I don't think I've told the story of the cardiac event on from my perspective. Okay, so years ago, I think one of the things that led to me getting to finalizing me getting kicked out or pushed out of Tsunami Bomb was we went to Japan and with the Vandals, and it was amazing. It was a really amazing trip. This would have been in 2003 or 2002, probably 2003 in spring, I think. Before we did Warp Tour, we went to Japan, and it was amazing. It was a really fun experience. It was about a week, and we had a really great time for the most part. But I had felt like the band was really showing a lot of cracks, and people were starting to really. I was feeling the band drifting kind of apart and getting kind of shitty with each other, and I was getting kind of frustrated with everybody. At one point, we went to a shrine, and I wish I remembered exactly where. I saw it one time on a travel show. But we went to a shrine and you basically give a donation and you pull out at this temple and you pull out a fortune. And I did that, and the thing said is that you have to be careful because you're about to be betrayed by everyone you know and trust. And the way is very unclear for you. But just hold on to who you are and what you are. It was very much like that. And it was straight up like, yeah, everyone you know is about to betray you. And I was like, what the fuck? This is the worst thing ever. I remember like not taking it too seriously because I mean, again, these are pre-made pieces of paper where fortunes are written out. But I'm also like, they literally wrote this down and gave it to somebody with the intention of giving it to some random person in a temple that pulls this out. I took that and I went home, and then the rest of the tour, the rest of the trip happened. And at one point, I never really drank, and I never really claimed to be straight edge, but I just didn't drink much. And then I got so tired. I think I was just exhausted and mentally exhausted. I got drunk off sake. I love sake. For some reason I really liked it, and I got wasted in Japan completely, which never happens. And the one thing I remember is that I headed back to where we were staying, and I proceeded to tell Gabe, Emily, and Mike exactly what I thought of each of them and everything that I thought they were doing that was fucking up and pissing me off. I'm pretty sure. Now, while I will go on record and apologize for how that I delivered that, I will say that I stand by everything I said. I think everything I said was correct. I think I told Gabe that he wasn't focused and he was too busy, running around doing whatever and not paying attention to the band itself. That Mike wanted to be in whatever fucking band was hot right now and was chasing some ridiculous scene thing rather than focusing on just embracing the moment that he's in and the band that he's in. He's too busy being miserable and paying time to being miserable. And then I thought Emily was so stuck up and not being kind to band members or anyone else, and so jealously guarding what she feels like she's entitled to. Like it was stuff like that. I was just like, I just let them all fucking have it. They all took it because I think they were so surprised by how much I just let out at them. The next morning, I saw them all, and it was a little awkward at first, and then I remember saying exactly what I just said. Hey, I'm sorry if I hurt anyone's feelings or for my behavior. I definitely was drunk, but I don't regret it, and I totally feel that way about all of you. So I think if I hadn't unified a movement behind removing me from the band up until then, I think I did right then. Though no one has confirmed it, and I don't even know that like Gabe or any of them remember it. I'm pretty sure that's the moment that anyone who wasn't completely sure about not working with me anymore was like, yeah, maybe Dominic's not. We don't want to play with him anymore. Pretty sure that's, and then we went home for like a week or 2 weeks, and then we went on work tour. And I'm pretty sure that, and then after work tour, they were like, yeah, we don't want to play with you anymore. So I think I drove the nail home, though I still stand by what I said.
I think out of all the questions I've asked people, that's probably one of my favorite stories that has been
Where I
told.
get drunk and let my entire band have it.
Yeah, like there's been some good ones and definitely some good ones, but that's definitely top tier
Oh, I
of
dragged them.
those.
I remember dragging them for it. It was a 45 minutes, and I think I gave each one of them 15 minutes. And I remember they kind of just took it. Like they were like shocked, and they just sat there, and I just laid into them. Like everything I had been holding back because I was just wasted and pissed. Yeah, that was probably not a good idea. I now have a far better, more constructive way of talking to people and realizing that everyone's tired and everyone's just doing the best they can. But yeah, I've never told anybody that. And that is 100% true story of how I pretty sure that's where not long that must have been one of the things that led to them going, you know what? Yeah, maybe we would be better off with a dog. They were not, but they thought they would be. So
Well, I'm going to end it on that note then. Two things before I finish it up. For us, last one. What would you like to plug? It could be about you, it could be about a friend or a cause, it could be about all of them.
Okay. Tsunami Bomb is still alive, and we are doing a run of shows in the Northwest in April. We are booking more stuff for later in the year. So last year there was supposed to be a bunch of EPs that came out, and one of them came out on Christmas Day, and so there are still more things to come out. We're going to drop a 7-inch on Alternative Tentacles with 2 songs on it that we're excited about. And then this year, they're working on it now. We should get a test. They're just taking forever on it. And then we just released, in December, we released a split with a band from Oakland called the Hammerbombs that we really love, that are a really great band. That some of the members are in a band with me called Loud Graves that I'm really proud of. So everyone should check out, if you like Tsunami Bomb, check out that split. It's called Bombs Away, Tsunami Bomb and the Hammer Bombs. We cover each other's songs, two of each other's songs, and then we wrote an original one. And we wrote an original of, which is basically a love song to the Hammer Bombs about them as our original. And then they covered Invasion Within and Sinkhole, and they did an amazing job, especially with they did an amazing job, and their original is fantastic. So it's definitely worth checking it out, and it's a really good release, and I'm really proud of it. We're gonna have a 7-inch coming out, and then Loud Graves is my other band, and we released a record last year called Loud Graves. Self-titled release. It's our first record, and I'm really proud of it, and I think you guys should check it out. It's a really cool record, and the band's coming up and doing a lot of cool stuff. So maybe take a look at that. But yeah, that's what's going on mainly. I work at Alternative Tentacles. I do their podcast, which is overdue for an episode. It's a great label. It's a record collector's label, so I really feel strongly about that place. And it's Jello Biafra curating a bunch of really cool stuff. We have a record out there called The Spine That Binds. That came out in 2019. We're overdue for a record. We know it. Just our writing process is really slow. Facebook sucks, so find us on Instagram or just go to our website, tsunamibomb.net, because social media is the devil and it is really a pain in the ass for Tsunami Bomb to deal with. But you can find us on tsunamibomb.net if you want to find out what we're doing.
Cool. Last question. What scene ethics do you hold on to this day?
As I move forward into the music scene, I have prized more being kind and being generous. I try to make sure that my presence in the music scene is both encouraging and helpful to those around me. I think that the best thing about the music scene is the DIY ethic. I think you should make music, you should be creative, you should put yourself out there. Don't be afraid to. Don't judge yourself on some imaginary scale, especially from social media, which is everyone's best moment, everyone's best day, and everyone's best work. Just focus on creating and being creative because the world needs more of that. And be kind, be welcoming, and be open. There's a seat for every butt in this scene. Everybody should be welcome. It's better when everyone's present. Things are worse the more exclusive you become. It's easy to gatekeep. Humans are tribal by nature. We tend to circle up and be like, those people are bad and we're great. But honestly, it is better when you're welcoming everyone. But while I say that, that does not mean that you should be tolerant of people who are trying to destroy that. Just because what people aren't doing is illegal or things are allowed, it doesn't mean they don't deserve a punch in the mouth. So be prepared to defend those around you and take care of those around you because they need it. And that's the best thing about the punk scene. That's the best lesson the punk scene taught me.